So today we are in week 3 of our fall series for this year, a series that we've titled Sabbath, being supported by the book of the same name by author Wayne Muller. Our first 2 weeks we have spent time with the Sabbath practices of rest and then also being in concert with the various rhythms that exist in life all around us. Today we're going to take a look at the role time has to play in the world of Sabbath. And to begin, I'd like to share something with you that was written by Henry David Thoreau, a very well-known poet and essayist, and also very well known for his transcendentalist teachings. It's something that you've likely heard either in full or bits and pieces of, because it's often quoted in different settings. And he wrote, "Why should we live in such a hurry and waste of life? We are determined to be starved before we are hungry. I wish to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life. I wish to learn what life has to teach, and not, when I come to die, discover that I have not lived. I do not wish to live what is not life. Living is so dear. Nor do I wish to practice resignation, unless it is quite necessary. I wish to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life. I want to cut a broad swath, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms. If it proves mean, then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world. Or if it is sublime, to know it by experience and to be able to give a true account of it." Mr. Thoreau seemingly wanted to devour all of life, to go deep and wide in experiencing all of its richness. He wanted to experience that across the full spectrum of life, both the mean and the sublime, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he didn't want to just race through the process. He seemed to know that doing so would likely cause him to miss more than he saw, which to him would be a waste of time. He wanted to do it deliberately, using his time, using it wisely, and focusing on what he felt to be essential to him, essential to his life. And that's what today's offering of Sabbath is all about. It's about our being deliberate of what we believe to be the riches, the richness of our lives and in our lives. It's about taking that time to go deep, to go wide, with an eye on how we spend our time, and on determining if what we see is in alignment with what we believe to be the richness of our lives. Wayne Muller's book was first published in 1999. And so, of course, as we're reading through it, we are seeing references to current day events that were happening at that time. Today, 21 years later, our reading for this week in this book from 1999 opens with the following paragraph. "There is a grand and lively debate flourishing throughout the land, lamenting the tragic decline in our morality and values. Where in our political life everyone cries in anguish, have our traditionally held values of honesty, courage, and integrity gone? Where in our civic life are the fundamental qualities of respect, deliberation, and wisdom? Where in our personal lives are the codes of individual responsibility and accountability, civility, and compassion?" Would you agree with me that if a new and updated edition of this book were to be published tomorrow, that this one paragraph would not have to be edited in any way to still be current? Of course it wouldn't. Of course it wouldn't. I mean, I believe that the majority of people, in our country have been asking these very same three questions or some form of them for several years now. When Muller wrote the book and made that comment, he mentions how refreshing and actually invigorating it felt to be a part of what he called a resurgent conversation. A resurgent conversation about these human qualities being searched for in those three questions that open our chapter 3 reading. He followed that comment with a but. With a but. And here's the issue of his but. He writes, but the pundits who frame these questions on radio and television, in books and magazines, rarely question the values of civilization itself, only the values of the people within it. At the least, this is misleading. At worst, it is dishonest, for it does not allow us to see the larger canvas on which this distressing evolution is painted. So what are some things that we might see on that larger canvas if it were presented to us? Well, Mr. Muller suggests a few things that we might very clearly see. First, we would see that these values that we have seemingly lost or misplaced are qualities in us that take time to form. Second, we would see that these values, these moral character traits and so forth, are not something that can be manufactured and sold. They can't be marketed and advertised. And third, we would see that we have traded our time for money. We have traded our time for money. And so it's important to note right here that although Wayne Muller and all the unity that we teach in unity, both ascribe to a very broad definition of wealth and what that means and what it is made up of. That being said, this installment of Sabbath is one that is clearly focused on talking about money and talking about why so many people continue to use it as their primary and sometimes even sole definition as to what constitutes someone's wealth and or the richness of someone's life. And I have to be honest, I found for myself that as I was rereading, this part of the book again for this week, that even though I absolutely hold to that broader view of prosperity in my beliefs, there always will be some of those embedded beliefs from either my upbringing or just being exposed to society as a whole over years now, that can still show up in my thought processes that say otherwise, that are still telling me that money might really be that defining factor. And so that's why it is so important to look at history. That's why it is so important to look at culture in order to determine how we each can work with some of these very, discomforting, unsettling thoughts that may still come up that we don't feel comfortable around because they don't align with what we know deep down we truly believe. And so one of the first thoughts that can come into our heads, into our minds, that we can spend some time with is a very well-known phrase: time is money. Time is money. I heard that so many times growing up. Come on, Eileen, hurry up. Time is money. Time is money. And it's the result of that trade that we made just a moment ago. We traded time being spent with things like core values and so forth. And we gave it all to making money. So let's step back for a moment. Let's just go back to what Muller offered about these inner qualities, these inner values that are within us that take time to form and bring forth. He said they just can't be conjured up, right? They can't be manufactured. You just can't sneeze and out they come, right? So if that's true, how do we find them? We find them by recognizing that they need to be nourished, that they need to be nurtured, that they need to be given attention, they need to be practiced, they need to be lived, they need the time that all of them require in order to simply get seeded and then be nurtured and nourished and then harvested forth by each of us. Now, I want to be clear about something because of the money aspect of today's lesson. It's not bad. Money is not a bad thing at all. It is an essential element of our lives. It is a means with which we are able to provide for ourselves and our families and help others do the same. However, it's not something that we can give all of our time to. So the question of the trade becomes one that just asks, how much time should we trade for it? And in today's culture, and a culture that has been developed over decades, that's not always an easy question to figure out. Because the culture is one in which the immediate idea of money by a lot of people is simply that those who have it are rich, those who don't are poor. That to be successful means you never stop working, that you always go after the next great accomplishment that you can make, that it is this striving to get your face, on the cover of a financial magazine, or to constantly be taking pictures of all the things, the material things that your money is buying, and share them, now, through social media, you can send them around the world. We have become a culture, far and large, of working more to make more so we can spend more and have more things. And when we go back, and Muller points this out, that when automation started to come into play, the concern of the people at that time was, what are we going to do with all this new leisure time? What are we going to do with all this time on our hands? But what happened? We took automation and used it instead to find ways to make more things, to make more money, so that we could spend more money and then have more things in our lives. So clearly, we have not been good as a civilization, as a culture, of having a balanced trade of time and money in our lives. So we want to find the balance between work and rest that we talked about in the first week of our series a couple of weeks ago. And one thing we can do, Muller suggests, is that we can just redefine and we can expand our definition and our views of that word wealth. Something that would likely begin to come clear as we continue to take time to look at that broader, larger canvas that's been presented to us, to see the things that we might want to paint over with something better, something different. And what we would begin to see appearing are the things that grow and come forth when we take time for Sabbath. The balance that would begin to occur when we expand our idea of compensation. Just that one idea, compensation, of payment for all that we do. Again, yes, it is good. It is very good to accept money and be compensated in that way. The balance occurs when we also consider paying ourselves in time, in the form of time. Time that's given to all those things that have gone missing or been misplaced. Time giving to all those things we've missed because we've been moving too fast. Time to improve and up-level our political and civic and personal lives and how we express them. Now, Muller then goes forth and he offers several practices of Sabbath that can awaken and begin to call those qualities forth from within us and out into the world. And this isn't going to be a news flash for anybody here today. I mean, he lists walking in the park, taking time for a nap. Somebody was just mentioning that in our pre-service conversations. Playing with children, reading a good book, singing, dancing, gardening, cooking a great meal, and then enjoying that great meal. Painting, journaling, meditating, praying. Time spent cultivating richness without having to spend a dime. This past week, I took a couple of days for spiritual renewal. It's something that I do about 3 times over the course of the year. And so for Tuesday and Wednesday, I was on kind of an extended time of Sabbath for myself. And when I stepped back into work Thursday morning, I began reading all the emails that had come in to my work address during my time offline. And I came upon one that was sent to everyone in the who's on the mailing list for the Wednesday morning coffee group. And this email was just noting that this past Wednesday's meetup was going to take place at the in the fellowship hall at the church, because the weather wasn't that conducive to meeting outdoors in the park like the group has been doing of late. And so then I kept flipping through more emails, and I saw the next one was a reply to that coffee session email. And I saw that it was from someone who I've learned just over time in speaking with many of you, is a fairly consistent attendee at these coffee gatherings. And she was declining the invitation. She declined the invitation to gather that day. And she noted in what she wrote that she had been and continued to be that morning quite upset because the night before she had chosen to tune in to the presidential debate that was televised. And although she noted that she would absolutely miss everyone that morning, she let everybody know that she had decided that she needed to stay home. She needed to take time to meditate and pray. She said she was going to take the time, and I'm paraphrasing her words here, to call forth the love and the light of spirit and just affirm it being shining down into a very unsettling, upsetting time and experience in our country today. That is practicing Sabbath. That is creating balance. That is putting together, cultivating a positive rhythm to interject into a very difficult situation. It is something that cannot be manufactured in a factory. It is something that no amount of money can buy. And I read that and I just had to stop reading, and I just went immediately into a moment or two of prayer myself. And my prayer for her Thursday morning was that her life had been enriched by her choice, that she had emerged from that time with a greater sense of inner peace and serenity, and an even closer connection with the presence of that very same light and love that she was affirming for everybody else that is within her. I encourage all of you to try to be as aware as you can of experiences in your life where you can make a similar choice, where you can take that deeper measure of your true wealth, the true richness that is in your life, tap into it and see all of the richness that can come forth from it. The last practice that I'll offer for this process today is again, to help us to see what we might want to place on that larger canvas in order to emphasize the bringing back of our morality and our values and so forth. And that is stop counting. Stop counting. Muller offers that this is something that we can let go of when we experience Sabbath. And he refers to this as a means of balancing all that we do count with all that we don't. All that we don't count is actually a very good way to expose the flaws that are inherent in that phrase, time is money. Now, Muller writes about, he shares the process by which we and other nations all around the world calculate what is called gross domestic product, or GDP for short. Now, that whole process came into being after World War II, and it came through the United Nations, which at that time was a fairly newly formed organization. It was during the war that the British used this process as a way to keep track of all of the resources they had for the war effort and their part in it, as well as the resources that they felt they would need to continue that effort as it moved forward. And so after the war, what happened is this process was decided to be used to determine the wealth of nations all around the world. So basically, a country counts. A country counts. It counts the number of goods and services bought and sold over the course of a given period of time, like a year. And if those numbers go up, then that nation is said to be strong and one with a very healthy economy. If those numbers go down, then that nation's strength is seen as being in decline as well. And as we all know, a nation with a declining economy is an indication that there are various dangers to its overall well-being that need to be addressed. Now, on a spreadsheet, all that looks logical, it makes sense, it's mathematically provable, and it's applicable to every nation in the same way. The mathematical formula doesn't favor one nation over another. How does Wayne Muller view it? In his words, it is astonishingly myopic, insidiously dangerous, even violent in its application. Now, those are pretty strong words. And here's why. When wealth is measured only in that way, only in a mathematical formula tied to money, anything done in time is seen as useless. It is seen as useless. I have a daughter-in-law, Natalie. She does not work outside the home. She is a stay-at-home mom. Natalie and my son, they have 4 children, 3 daughters and 1 son. The youngest 2 are twins, and they all range in age from 3 to 11 years of age. The 2 oldest kids are in school, a school that is located in the family dining room, with Natalie being the daily teacher's aide and sometimes substitute. The youngest 2, the twins, they still need a lot of attention, and in fact, they are in their very formative years and require teaching every day, even though they're not eligible just yet to be in a formal school. Every day, Natalie works with them, teaches them. She creates crafts and projects for them to do, always, 9 out of 10 times, I'll say, with an educational theme underlying them. Natalie is a wonderful cook. She spent several years in culinary school, and she cooks often from scratch, always with presentation on a plate. And yes, sometimes fast food and pizza find their way into the home and onto the menu, but more often than not, there is a very healthy meal prepared and offered. The home is clean. My son is happy. The family is constantly going out, having days of fun with each other, often that Natalie creates, finds things to do, places to go. She gives a lot of her time to her family, to their education, to their well-being. There is such richness in the memories that they are creating together. There is happiness that I have seen up close and personal in my grandchildren's eyes. I hear it in their voice. There is such love present and being nurtured. And by GDP calculations, we would say that everything that Natalie does is useless. Useless. I mean, can you hear the dismissal of love, of compassion and commitment and responsibility and accountability and so much more in those words? Can you begin to feel what it would be like to be dismissed in that way and hear your husband being praised when he walks in the door because how he spent his time that day was making more money for his employer? The same could be said for any of you who, like our coffee congregant, give any of your time to our listing from before, things that you do with your time. So let's choose not to not listen only to the call of money or to people who see it as the only true measure of our worth and our wealth. Let's listen instead to the call of our soul, to the call of spirit in us, to the call of Sabbath. Let's take the time during Sabbath, as Wayne Muller writes, to remember that the fundamental precepts with which we guide our life are cultivated, nourished, and harvested in time. That it is useful during Sabbath to clarify or reaffirm those principles that calibrate our inner compass and illuminate our inner direction. time is of the essence. How will you spend yours in the coming days? How will you affirm or reaffirm your overall wealth as you believe that word to be defined? See, time and money, they're like a good marriage. If the marriage is good, it's likely because both spouses honor each other. Sabbath is the way to honor both time and money in your life. The key is to not live in ways that are too hurried or that would make you look back on one day and be like Thoreau saying, well, that was a waste of time. Rather, live your life with eyes wide open to all that it offers. Again, the meanness and the sublime and everything in between. All that it offers. Learn what it came to teach. Do what is yours to do. Make and spend money. Make and spend time in Sabbath. Perhaps this week, you can consider having your own resurgent conversation with Spirit. Topic of your choice, but a resurgent conversation. And after that, then just bring forth the very best of who you are. Bring it forth. Bring forth what you want others to recognize in themselves and bring forth. See it as bringing forth this fabulous wealth of harvest that once you share it, not only blesses you, but also the rest of us as well. God bless you.